back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today is my first video with my new camera and my new setup. I really hope you guys like it. Let me know what you guys think. Anyways, let's start on the project. Today's project, we're going to be making Jigsaw from the Saw movie. The new movie came out recently, so I thought what better timing. Let's make the puppet from it. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing we're going to do is get all of our fabric cut out. I'm going to show off all the patterns that I drew out. This one right here is for the main body. It's nothing fancy, just kind of like a really bulky stick figure. And the fabric I'm going to use for this is going to be white. You're really not going to see any of it, so it really doesn't matter. The pattern for the pants is really simple. I basically just traced around the other pattern that we used to make his body. I just made it slightly larger so that it can fit on him after the body is stuffed. Now his shirt is going to be a bit more complicated. This piece right here is going to be for the back, and then I cut this part off so we can use this to make the front pieces. That way they overlap and you can button it. For his collar, I drew out this little pattern right here, and I'm going to basically just double up on it, so this will go on each side of the front of the shirt. So I'm going to sew his body first. After that, I'm going to start on the pants. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the edges on the end of the pants. That way we have a nice smooth ending to the pants and it's not a rough cut. After that, I'm just going to put the two pieces of fabric together, sew down the sides of it, and then doing the inseam. I'm going to do the same thing to the ends of the coat and the sleeves. After that, I'm going to fold over how the shirt's going to lay, and then I'm going to sew along the under part of the arms and going down the sides. For the collar, I folded a piece of fabric over itself and then I drew it out. I'm going to follow these lines, and then I'm going to trim off all the extra fabric, and then we're going to cut a hole so we can flip the collar inside out, or right side out. Now that the collar's done, I just need to pin it to the shirt, and then we can sew that on as well. Now the rest of the sewing has to wait until the clay pieces are done, so we're going to start on those. For the face, I have a foam ball that I'm going to cover up in tinfoil. I'm doing this so after we're done sculpting it, I can take the foam out and we can put it in the oven. You don't want to put foam in the oven. So I have my surface all nice and prepped, and I'm going to start layering clay on to create a nice base to work with. After we have a good amount of clay built up, we're going to start adding the features. So I'm going to start with the nose and then adding his big cheeks. After that, we're going to build up the clay for his forehead and then creating a nice brow. He doesn't have eyebrows, but he does have like the shape of them. Now we're going to work on adding some clay to the bottom of the face for his jaw and chin. His jaw is actually very prominent, so I'm adding quite a bit of clay for this. I'll probably hollow some of it out after I get it sculpted, that way we're not using so much clay and having the head very heavy. After I have the basic shape for the chin, I'm going to add the details like where the mouth is going to go and the lines to make it look like his mouth can actually open and close. Lastly, we're just going to add a little bit of clay around his mouth to create a lip. Now I'm not going to sculpt his eyes, I'm going to leave his face blank and we're going to just paint them on afterwards, so I'm not adding any details to that yet. Okay, now we're going to start on the clay shoes. Now the shoes don't need a whole lot of detail. I'm basically just going to roll some clay out. We're going to trace this little pattern that I made for the base of the shoe, and then we're going to add a little bit of tread to it. I'm going to bake this at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 20 minutes, and then we're going to work on the top of the shoe. For the top of the shoe, we're going to start with the toes, so I'm just going to build up clay where the toes would be. Afterwards, I'm going to hollow this out and put tinfoil inside of it so we're not using a ton of clay. If you want, you can put tinfoil down first and then lay the clay on top, but I had trouble making it nice and smooth, so this is the way I'm going to do it. Next, we're going to add some clay to the heel of the shoe. Right now it kind of looks like a slipper, but we're going to kind of shape it here and there until we get a more shoe shape. Now you can pretty much stop your shoe if you want at this point because you don't need a whole lot of detail. I'm just going to put a little bit of line work to make it look like there's laces. Now I'm going to keep the gloves pretty simple. I just basically have a piece of wire and a ball of clay. I'm going to put the ball of clay at the end of the wire, and then I have a couple pieces of wire that I have cut out, and I'm going to push those into the clay where I want the fingers to go. After that, we're going to bake this in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly 15 to 20 minutes. Once that's out of the oven and cooled, we can start adding clay to the wires to make fingers. Now once we have all our pieces the way we like them, we're going to put everything in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for roughly about 40 to 50 minutes. Okay, now we can start on the painting. I'm going to leave the hands and feet really simple. For the shoes, I'm just going to paint them a nice dark red, and then the tread is going to be a black. For the gloves, I'm just going to paint them an off-white and then add some highlights to them after that's dried. Now before we start painting the face, I'm going to glue it to our foam ball so it's a lot easier to handle. Once that's cooled, I'm going to use some black and go into the cracks of the mouth and the jaw to darken those up. And then we're going to go over the whole face with an off-white and then add some highlights to that after that's dried. Now for the eyes, once the paint was dried, I used a pencil and I drew out the basic shape that I wanted for them, and I'm going to fill this in with black. After that, I drew in the shape for his pupils and I painted those a nice dark red, and then I did a black circle in the middle of that. Next, I used a really bright red to go over his lips and then do the little spirals that are on his cheeks. Now after my paint has dried, I went over everything with a resin. If you don't like this method, you can use a spray-on sealant or a varnish. Okay, now we can start putting the body together. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to stuff the main body and then put the wire frame inside of it. Once the wire frame is inside of him, we're going to dress him. So I'm going to put his pants on and then we're going to glue his shoes to the end of his legs. Now he does have an undershirt that kind of shows a little bit, so I'm going to cut some fabric out for that and sew it so we can make a little collar for that shirt. And then I'm going to make a red bow tie for him. I'm going to keep it simple and use the same pattern to make both pieces of the bow tie. So the main body of the bow tie, I'm just going to sew around these lines, and then for the piece that holds it together, I'm just going to fold some fabric over and sew one line. This piece will get flipped right side out and go around the bow. Now that we have these pieces done, we can add them to the body. So I'm going to lay out the pieces of fabric for his white shirt. You don't have to use anything fancy for sewing it. I'm just going to use a basic stitch to get it on. And then I'm going to use white thread to sew the collar into place. After that, we can sew on the bow tie and then put his coat on. Once I have his coat on, I'm going to make sure the sleeves are pulled up and we're going to glue his gloves onto his arms. Now to attach his head, the foam ball that I have for the base of his head actually has a hole in it, so I'm just going to fill this hole with some hot glue and we're going to push the wire into that. Of course, I'm also going to be gluing the fabric for his neck around that as well. Lastly, we just need to give him some hair, so I have some black fur fabric that I'm going to glue to the back of the head, and then he'll be all finished. Okay guys, and that's how I made Jigsaw from the Saw movie. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If so, leave me a like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Leave comments down below if you have ideas for future projects, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!